The wife is a slave. Don't slack off on the housework. Pregnant with a big belly in my 9th month, I was pushed without hesitation by my husband, Daniel. It seems he was dissatisfied because I was lying down all the time, not doing housework due to the risk of premature birth. I didn't expect kindness from him and was used to being scolded. But today, Daniel's eyes were different from usual. Instead of enjoying tormenting her, it seemed like he was venting his great anxiety. "Oh, just give me alcohol, more alcohol." Daniel drank voraciously, spilling alcohol from the corners of his mouth. Before long, he was drunk and snoring loudly in the living room. Since I'm apparently a slave named wife, I cleaned up the empty cans and covered Daniel with a blanket so he wouldn't catch a cold. Running away to alcohol, how pathetic. I looked down on him and quietly raised the corners of my mouth. The next morning, Daniel said he would take a day off from work because he caught a cold and dove under the covers. However, I didn't let him off. Thanks to Daniel, I can live comfortably. Thank you always. I patted the back of a Daniel, who looked unusually lacking in confidence, gently. A husband's worth is in his earnings. Now, off to work you go. I don't know what will happen there, though. I'm Eleanor Jones, 23 years old. I married Daniel, who is a decade older, 6 months ago. Yes, that's perfect. Daniel nodded in satisfaction after tasting the meal. I breathed a sigh of relief. That's how he always praises me. Coming home tired to a tidy room, a delicious meal, and my beautiful Eleanor waiting for me makes me the happiest man alive. I meticulously do the housework so that he can have a bit of ease in his busy life. It's gratifying to be appreciated for it. Eleanor, you're lucky to have me as your husband. To be such an elegant lady at your age. Daniel, older, is reliable and always leads me. We met at a job fair while I was job hunting. I ended up marrying him instead of taking a job. So, while my friends are working hard at their new jobs, it's true I live an elegant life as a housewife. He specifies the number of dishes for meals and has preferences like separating laundry by color. Daniel encouraged me to take cooking classes. So, I don't have too much spare time, but it's rewarding because Daniel acknowledges me with a smile. This meat is delicious. The best. It was expensive, wasn't it? You should be thankful to me. Daniel has always been good at studying and now works at a big company. Well, I guess I'm what you'd call an elite, Daniel once said. His slightly condescending attitude seems full of self-confidence and cool. And now, a new life is growing inside me. I believed our family would become even happier. The disturbance began when I was 3 months pregnant. 1, 2, 3, there are only 3 side dishes. That's strange, have my eyes gone bad from being too tired? Daniel exaggeratedly counted the dishes. I'm sorry. I haven't been feeling well. And? I've started experiencing morning sickness and can't move as I want to. Plus, the smell of food is so strong, it's hard to cook. Daniel listens to my story without moving an eyebrow. I was sharing my tough feelings, hoping he would understand, but it felt like I was just making excuses. I see. Daniel nods slightly, lifting his chin. Imagine this, Eleanor. We go to a restaurant, and the chef says, "Sorry, I'm not feeling well," and only serves an appetizer. Is that acceptable? I shake my head slightly. Next scenario. We go to a theater, and the actress says, "Sorry, I'm not feeling well," lies down on stage without makeup, and doesn't perform. Is that acceptable? I look down and shake my head again. Right, it's not. That's abandoning one's duties. If I were the customer, I'd be furious. But, what you're doing now, Eleanor, is just that. Daniel looks into my face, which is deeply bowed. Is Eleanor supposed to be a pet that I need to take care of? If a housewife doesn't do housework, she has no value. Are you fully intending to leech off me? I'm sorry. I apologize again in a barely audible voice. This is terrible. Imagine how I feel, having a gloomy wife right in front of me. And, why are your lips blue? Can't you at least put on some lipstick? Makeup is basic manners for women. Don't neglect that just because you're a housewife disconnected from the outside world. I'm sorry. I don't know how to make him understand the pain of morning sickness. I'm struggling with nausea even now, lacking the energy to argue. All I could do was apologize. From that point on, Daniel changed. When he comes home from work, he sighs heavily. Wow. Did you put on makeup? I did. Maybe it's a bit light? Huh. So you're saying your ugliness can't be hidden even with makeup? You look like a tired old lady, and you're still young. Daniel traces his finger over the shelf and lightly blows on it. Then, right after starting his meal, Daniel frowns and puts down his fork. This tastes bad. Eating this while looking at your gloomy face makes any gourmet meal taste bad. I'd rather go to a fast food place, it'd be 100 times better. And then, Daniel leaves the house. The meal I prepared while nauseous, spending hours, is left almost untouched. Eventually, Daniel's return home comes late at night. He doesn't want to see my ugly face or eat the tasteless food, it seems. Morning sickness means you can laze around all day, huh? Pregnant women are lucky. Well, I'm making this uncomfortable home bearable by eating out, so you should really be thankful. This isn't the happiness I envisioned. No matter how late, I greet Daniel when he returns home. That was all I could do, I was desperate. Daniel no longer touches my slightly growing belly. Instead, he avoids me as if I disgust him. Welcome home. No reply, just a click of the tongue. He briskly walks past me, and the smell of him induces a strong wave of nausea. When I clean his clothes, I try to hold my breath as much as possible because the smell is so unbearable, it makes me dizzy. I've never minded Daniel's scent before. Is it because of the pregnancy? No, it's not just that. I pick up a suit soaked with scent with my fingertips. From the pocket of Daniel's discarded suit, I take out receipts, coins, and crumpled tissues. I straighten out a crumpled receipt. Daniel said he preferred a diner to my cooking, but it's a receipt from a fancy restaurant. 4-2. I wonder who he went with. I had given up on the reliable Daniel I loved. The suit leaves behind the sweet smell of perfume. I can't help but notice the shadow of another woman. But I need Daniel for me and the baby to live. I rolled up the receipt again. It's my fault for being cheated on. It's inevitable, given my gloomy face and inability to do proper housework. After giving birth, I'll be free from morning sickness and my heavy body, and I should be able to do housework as before. Moreover, with a cute baby, I'm sure Daniel's heart will return. I was holding out, just enduring for now. Sunday morning. Daniel gets up leisurely. He finally sits at the breakfast table, so I prepare breakfast. I smile a little and offer him a plate, but Daniel distorts his face. Wow. Have you looked in the mirror? I'm already made up and dressed. I thought maybe my mascara had smudged, but that wasn't it. Wow, you've really put on weight. Not just your face, but your whole body shape has changed too much. My face heated up instantly. I usually don't talk back, but I couldn't help responding. It's because the baby in my belly is getting bigger. No, it's not just the belly. Your whole body has become sloppy. It feels like your butt has sagged, and your back is round. Spare me. If youth is your only asset, being unattractive defeats the purpose, doesn't it? Daniel took a weary sip of his coffee. Where did my young and cute Eleanor go? Daniel scrutinized me from head to toe. Do you know why I married you, Eleanor? Because you were young and cute. That's it. And you were obedient and domestic, truly the ideal wife. But what about now, Eleanor? You don't do any housework, and your looks have deteriorated. This is like fraud, isn't it? I opened my mouth, but no voice came out. Daniel, getting carried away, scolded me even more. Youth will fade away eventually, so why did I choose something like that? I can't regret it enough. I thought Eleanor, who respected me, was cute at first. But, independence was also necessary. I, too, wanted to get a job and be independent once. But Daniel strongly opposed that. You don't need to work. Just marry me. There are people at the company who took maternity leave and didn't whine about morning sickness or anything, just worked as usual. And recently, a single mother joined. Admirable, huh? Raising a child on her own. That's what being a professional is all about. Get it? Nausea surged up even as I listened. Unable to bear it, I dashed to the bathroom. Daniel's voice pierced my back. Oh, run away. Nice, huh? Housewives don't have to take responsibility. No matter how much I vomited, the nausea wouldn't subside. Eventually, Daniel stood behind me. Even seeing me cry and suffer, all he could say was, "That's disgusting." Without Daniel, me and the baby couldn't survive. So I had to endure. I chanted this to myself over and over again. Tears wouldn't stop. Underestimating me greatly, Daniel's attitude worsened day by day. Late-night returns were still better. He started staying out without any contact. And yet, he would smirk, "You should still prepare my meals," thinking I might not eat. I'm working hard, wearing myself out at work. Don't slack off on the simple job of a housewife. He would still leave restaurant receipts for two in his pockets. Enjoying a fancy dinner with someone else and then taking pleasure in tormenting me at home is crazy. But I can't survive without Daniel. I chanted it unconsciously again, but stopped midway due to a tight feeling in my belly. Soon, the pain in my belly eased. Then, I felt a strong push from inside my belly. It was the first fetal movement. I'm going to be a parent to the child in my belly, too. I can't just live depending on Daniel. It was the moment I felt a sense of responsibility as a parent. However, it's difficult to work and be independent while pregnant. I did the housework without upsetting Daniel too much, and when he came home, I took care of him diligently, saying, "Welcome back, you must be tired from work." With my morning sickness slightly eased, I was able to do a reasonable amount of housework. "Here's your meal." "Huh, you actually made dinner." As a wife, that's expected, right? "But you must have plenty of time during the day, just lazing around while I'm slaving away at work." "Ah, I'm envious. I wish I could be pregnant too." "Thank you always," I said, looking down. Daniel looked down on me with satisfaction. It seemed like Daniel was still enjoying himself outside, but on the surface, things were peaceful. However, this peace did not last long. I developed a risk of preterm birth. Although I avoided hospitalization, I had to stay in bed at home, unable to do even the minimum housework. I spent my days just lying down, looking at my smartphone or tablet. Fortunately, it was a relief that Daniel was hardly home. I even thought it was good that he didn't care about me and was enjoying himself. But when he occasionally came home, I was harshly blamed. "You're sleeping again? Having a wife who just sleeps." I really drew the short straw. "Eating and sleeping, you're just like a cow." Weird, did I marry a cow? No matter how much he insulted me, since I was indeed just lying down, I apologized, saying, "I'm sorry." If I acted meekly, Daniel would be satisfied. That suddenly changed one day. It was the last day of my 10-month of pregnancy. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of the full term, and I was finally going to be relieved from bed rest. Daniel came home in the evening, unusually early, and started yelling at me with a red face as soon as he saw me. I hurriedly stuffed the tablet I was holding into the bed. "Are you lazing around again? While I'm working hard outside. It's infuriating." He threw his bag on the floor. At the loud noise and shouting, I shrank for a moment. Daniel grabbed me by the collar, looking scared. "Who do you think is providing for you? I'm not working to feed a lazy person like you." "I'm sorry. I appreciate you," I managed to say with a trembling voice. "What's your job, huh? Housework, right? Why are you sleeping? You need to work too. Seeing you laze around just pisses me off." "I'm sorry." I wasn't expecting kindness from Daniel, and I was used to being scolded. But today, Daniel's eyes were different from usual. Instead of enjoying tormenting me, it seemed like he was venting his great anxiety. It just looked like he was bluffing.
Don't act so spoiled forever. Think about your situation.
I was pushed to the floor. Pointing at me, he shouted.
The wife is a slave. Don't slack off on the housework.
Daniel seemed unable to contain his anger, hitting the wall several times.
Just give me alcohol, more alcohol.
Daniel drank voraciously, spilling alcohol from the corners of his mouth. Before long, he was drunk, snoring loudly in the living room. Since I'm apparently a slave named wife, I cleaned up the empty cans and covered Daniel with a blanket so he wouldn't catch a cold.
Running away to alcohol is pathetic.
I looked down on him and quietly raised the corners of my mouth. The next morning, I woke Daniel up in time for work. But he just drank a glass of water and went to the bedroom.
Hey Daniel, what about work?
I asked softly, and Daniel groaned. Daniel is usually good with alcohol. And I think he barely drank last night before falling asleep. He didn't look too hungover.
I'm taking a day off.
Daniel mumbled into the duvet. I immediately checked his neck for a fever. You don't have a fever.
Shut up, it's a cold. My throat hurts. My head hurts too. I'm gonna have a fever soon.
Daniel brushed off my hand and covered his head with the duvet.
Okay, then I'll make some porridge.
If my husband says he has a cold, it's my duty as his wife to make porridge. I quickly prepared the porridge and presented it to Daniel.
Eat this, then go to work.
Huh?
I told you, I'm taking the day off.
Daniel replied with full energy.
That's not okay.
I smiled at him, but Daniel frowned and froze. I had cleaned up the living room he had messed up last night and was taking care of him. Feeling heavy yet working as a wife. So, I won't allow Daniel to take a day off from work either.
I do the housework, and you work, Daniel. Thanks to you, I can live.
Thank you always. Daniel fell silent, looking puzzled. I patted his back, which seemed unusually lacking in confidence.
A husband's worth is in his earnings.
Then, I forcefully got him ready and headed to the station to push him onto the train. I held onto his arm to make sure we didn't get separated.
Come on, we have to hurry so you're not late.
Huh?
Why are you even coming with me? You're not feeling well, right? I'm worried, so I'll come too. Besides, I was going to shop near your office, so don't mind me.
I intended to make sure Daniel didn't pretend to go to work and skip out.
I'm not feeling sick anymore. Get off the train. That's good. But I said I was going shopping, remember? Why go all the way there? You could shop near our house.
Daniel didn't seem to have the energy to yell amidst the crowd. He oddly took a longer route and walked slowly, looking strange. Despite his resistance, we arrived at the company. We were a little past the start of the workday. It seemed someone was worried about Daniel being late, as a man came out to greet us outside the company.
Hey Daniel.
Late, huh?
Taking an executive's liberty?
The man was older than Daniel, who was completely intimidated. The man's mouth was smiling, but his eyes were sharp and scary. It felt like there was no escaping his intense gaze. He firmly grabbed Daniel's arm as he tried to retreat.
Get inside quickly.
Daniel looked terrified, as if being dragged into a dangerous place. He reached out to me for help.
Eleanor, please do your best at work,
I said with a bright smile. Daniel was trembling.
You must be Daniel's wife. Thank you for bringing him all the way here. We have an important meeting to discuss. Would you care to join us?
Yes, please. In the conference room, Daniel sat as small as possible on a chair. The man introduced himself as Daniel's direct supervisor. Additionally, there was an older man showing clear anger. There was also a woman with a sullen face.
Daniel, do you have anything to say?
The supervisor asked in a low voice. Daniel looked down and remained silent.
If Daniel is silent, let us share what we know. Despite having a family, you seem to have been quite close with her from the same department.
Referring to the sullen-faced woman.
As a company, we wouldn't normally reprimand an employee's affair, but first, how about apologizing to your wife?
Daniel glanced at me but bit his lip. His pride, as high as Everest, wouldn't allow him to apologize.
An affair? What are you talking about? I have no recollection of such a thing. You must be mistaken.
Daniel defended himself in a fading voice. But no one believed him.
Then, how about this?
I presented several photos. Photos of Daniel and Ms. Davis intimately close together.
What?
Daniel was speechless. He looked back and forth between me and the photos, making me burst into laughter.
You got caught having an affair at work yesterday, right? You came home as if fleeing, and I wondered what you would do the next day and beyond. Pretending to have caught a cold like a grade schooler, how long were you planning to skip work?
Daniel's eyes were so wide they looked like they might pop out.
I was the one who reported the affair to the company.
Daniel couldn't find his voice, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. Daniel was hardly ever at home, and even though I wanted to move, I couldn't get out of bed. So, I had plenty of time to snoop through his tablet. It took me a while to figure out the password, but it turned out to be his birthday. Just like Daniel, who loves himself so much. With the tablet synced to his smartphone, I had unlimited access to photos and messages. Underestimated by him, Daniel's face turned redder as I caught him in the act. Without caring we were at his workplace, he spat at me.
Don't joke around. Just for an affair, you involve the company? I only reported it because the other party seemed to be from the workplace. And you think you'll get away with this? Now that the affair is out, there'll be some punishment, like a pay cut or demotion. You get that, right? Our income will decrease. This will trouble you too. Especially with a baby on the way.
How cowardly of him to bring up the baby now, when he had shown no interest before. But I remained calm. It was precisely because the baby was coming that I acted.
A wife is a slave, right? I can't imagine this harassment stopping once the baby is born. I don't want to raise a child in a home where it's normal for the mother to be insulted. A harasser and cheater like Daniel changing into a good father?
Impossible.
We don't need a father who's nothing but harmful. I want a divorce before the baby arrives.
Daniel froze, pushed away by a wife, no, a slave. I had thought Daniel was always a confident adult, but when cornered, he couldn't come up with a single good excuse. The gap between his usual posturing and his pathetic state now was stark.
It's only natural for the wife to give up on you. So, maybe it's time we also had a talk.
An older man spoke up. It wasn't just me who couldn't forgive Daniel, who was completely disheartened.
Why even involve the executive vice president? Isn't this making too much of a fuss?
Daniel muttered with a nearly tearful grimace. The older man was the executive vice president. The anger emanating from the executive vice president over a mere employee's affair scandal was far from ordinary.
How dare you lay a hand on my daughter? What?
Daniel let out an absurdly surprised noise. After his eyes darted around for a moment, realization dawned on him.
Mr. Davis, the executive vice president. Her father?
Yes, the executive vice president was the father of Daniel's affair partner. Frustrated by just divorcing, I reported the affair to the company. I thought it would be good if Daniel got a pay cut and was looked down upon by everyone at the company, as he had said. That was all I felt. However, when I managed to get in touch with Daniel's boss and told him, the boss was visibly shaken even over the phone.
Despite having a wife who's heavily pregnant, what are you doing?
The executive vice president's angry voice thundered. Daniel couldn't just stay silent and immediately apologized rapidly.
I'm deeply disappointed in my daughter too, for having an affair with a married man. I truly apologize to your wife.
She was the single mother woman Daniel had talked about. Perhaps Daniel, who was disgusted by me, a so-called useless housewife, was attracted to her because she managed both work and childcare. But in reality, she had given birth out of wedlock, and her childcare was mostly left to her mother while she went out. That's why the executive vice president had her join the company through connections, wanting to keep an eye on her. Though she still neglected her child, her surprisingly regular attendance had reassured the executive vice president. Little did he know it was to meet Daniel, a realization that was unbearable.
I'm sorry. I've broken up with her. We're definitely over. I'm sorry.
Daniel was just apologizing over and over.
Yeah, I heard from my daughter that you've already broken up,
the executive vice president said, then firmly grabbed Daniel's head.
It's a wonder why people like you, with genes that shouldn't be passed down to future generations, seem to have no issue with fertility. An apology won't cut it. Even if we break up, your sins won't be erased. While my daughter had her faults, you still have a responsibility to bear.
Huh?
My daughter was pregnant. Oh!
Daniel collapsed as if his bones had turned to jelly.
It's not true. There's no child. It's okay.
His feeble denial only ignited the executive's rage.
Please, I'm sorry.
Daniel was struck by the executive's iron fist. Looking up for salvation, Daniel saw the executive had turned into a complete monster, and the boss and the daughter were looking away. She seemed to have wanted to have the child and marry Daniel. She harbored resentment towards him. Though she was also at fault for cheating, Daniel, who toyed with her feelings, was the worst offender. The only one who met my gaze, Daniel blurted out.
Eleanor, it's just terrible.
Yeah, terrible. You are, Daniel. Having said my piece, I left the conference room. When I stepped out into the hallway, the crowd that had gathered quickly dispersed. It seemed like rubberneckers had gathered. Daniel no longer has a place in this company. Daniel's screams could be heard from the conference room. Later on, Daniel and I got divorced.
I've been thinking about divorce for a long time. I was just putting up with it because I felt sorry for you.
Despite not wanting to admit he was dumped, our divorce proceeded smoothly. And then, the company's verdict was to fire him. He had braced himself for a pay cut or demotion, but the punishment was more severe. A normal person would have resigned due to the spread of rumors within the company, but Daniel, full of pride, wanted to cling to the prestigious company. He found it hard to accept his dismissal and protested vehemently. Actually, it was the result of me submitting various pieces of evidence to the company. Exchanging messages frequently during work hours was just the tip of the iceberg. Claiming to be out for work but just taking breaks at hotels. And to top it off, he was expensing those costs. There's no excuse for that. After breaking up with her and losing his job, Daniel came back to me. Despite us already being divorced, the nerve of him showing up. When you lose everything, you realize what's truly important. I want Eleanor more than status or honor. Hey, was the child born? I want to meet my child. I've heard that the in-laws were furious with Daniel's foolish actions and cut ties with him. They were looking forward to holding their grandchild soon, but that hope was shattered. They certainly aren't happy to have an unemployed middle-aged son return home instead of a cute grandchild. It's no surprise he was turned away at the door. With nowhere else to turn, he moved from his expensive condo to a cheaper one. Pride is getting in the way of finding a new job. I have no sympathy for him running out of savings. He must be lonely enough to come crawling back to an ex-slave like me.
My child? What are you talking about? There's never been a father in my child's life.
I'd rather proudly say there's no father than have such a man claim the title. Perhaps it was my firm stance, but Daniel slouched away with his tail between his legs. I'm now living at my parents' house. When I decided to marry Daniel at a young age, my parents were worried. It was hard to discuss Daniel with them, but they saw right through me. When I couldn't bear it any longer and confessed about the emotional abuse and infidelity, they comforted me as if they had known all along. I wanted to gather evidence for a favorable divorce, so I hesitated to bring it up for a while. My parents must have been worried sick about leaving their pregnant daughter with an abusive husband. Yet, they respected my wishes and watched over me. When I was at risk of premature labor and couldn't move, my mom came over to clean and cook for me. Without my parents' help, I wouldn't have been able to escape Daniel. I'm sorry for being such a burden. Feeling guilty for failing at marriage and having to rely on my parents with a child in tow. My mom chuckled softly. You know, taking care of a baby is tough. Diapers leak, and you don't get much sleep at night. You're always inconveniencing the baby. But I'm happy. You understand now that you're a mom, right? No matter how much trouble they cause, it's not a bother if it's for your own child. My mom is feeding the baby some milk. Her profile looks so gentle. It made me feel like I had turned back into a little kid myself. When I quietly hugged her, just like she does with the baby, she warmly patted my head with her hand.